So it's my pleasure now to introduce Sarah Carney from Microsoft. And Sarah is the Chief Technology Officer for Microsoft Australia and New Zealand. She's based out of Canberra, so having a yap to her a minute ago. And prior to Microsoft, Sarah served in the Australian Army. That was followed by a decade travelling the world and working across a broad range of industries in both Europe and the Middle East. So she had a wonderful career. And Sarah is really going to give a wonderful insight into the topic of bracing AI. So please make Sarah welcome.
Hello. Thank you. I don't normally bring my phone to the stage, but I was so inspired at the expo yesterday, I thought I'd try a live demo. So partway through, we're going to go a bit crazy and try and talk to my phone and get some insights from it. The team asked me to talk a bit about artificial intelligence, and I find that such a hard thing to do for an audience that already knows so much about this. You're already embracing this in everything that you do. So I'm going to try and set the scene. What is AI? Why are we talking about it? Why is everyone so excited in this moment? And then talk a bit about where we think the future goes and some of the crazier things that we see happening. So a tale of two stories. Oh, and I've clicked a million miles through somehow. Clearly I'm waving too wildly and breaking the slides. A tale of two stories. Now I can click. No one should ever give me a clicker this size. It's too much fun. And so I want to talk about the AI revolution, or really the evolution that we face into. And we talk about artificial intelligence all the time, as if it's a singular thing. And people use these words interchangeably. We talk about machine learning. We talk about data science. And so I'm showing my age a little bit. I love this phrase. You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. So I want to talk a little bit about what is artificial intelligence. And it's not just one thing. It's actually a body of knowledge. It starts 70-odd years ago with this concept of could we make machines act like humans? So artificial intelligence. And nested within that are all these evolutions that people then use interchangeably, deep learning, machine learning, and this latest evolution, generative AI. And the reason we love talking about it in this moment is because generative AI makes it so personal. Hands up who hasn't had a go with ChatGPT, Copilot, or some other form of generative AI. It's okay if you haven't. It's okay, a couple, right? But most of us have had a go at it because it's so easy. You get to chat with it, you write poetry for your loved ones, you look really smart, it's awesome. I'm going to try it later live on stage on some farming topics. But why is it so revolutionary? And I promise your eyes are going to glaze over on this slide. Don't panic. This is classic AI. In order to make AI work, traditionally you needed a huge bucket of data that you then trained to do one thing. And so you can see here, if it's visual, you wanted a whole lot of photos. If it's auditory, you need a whole lot of auditory files. So in order to play the game of Chihuahua or muffins, you needed a whole load of images of Chihuahuas and muffins. This is a great game about a year ago. Is it a Chihuahua? Is it a muffin? But traditional AI needed a huge amount of data to enable you to do that one thing. And of course, that means it's really rigid. It can only do that one thing. It does it really well. The reason why we love generative AI is it's a giant bucket of data. It's all the things. And that's why you can ask it to write poetry, and you can ask the same system to draw you a picture, and you can ask the same system to give you a scientific analysis of a set of papers. It's got a huge bucket of data that can do many, many things. And that's why it's so interesting. But often we get caught up in it's smart, it feels really bright, it feels human-like in what it's doing. But what it's actually doing is just making the next best guess. So if I say the cat sat on the, most of you in your heads are now saying mat. That's what the system does. It draws a line between the phrases that we use, the words we use, and the most common next word. So that's how it feels so smart. It's making the next best guess. But what it has enabled is a whole range of really interesting ways that people are using this. And I've gathered sort of 4 use cases that talk to some of the breadth of the way people are using this. So the popcorn. There's a company in New Zealand called Vista. They are cinema operators, and their customers want data on how many tickets did I sell, how much popcorn was sold overnight. And normally they would have to log into some kind of spreadsheet, a database to get that information. And so Vista thought, what if we could create individual personalized podcasts for every single one of our cinema operators so they can listen to that information on their way into the office and they never have to look at that dashboard again. So a really cool way of giving people that information they need individualized to they do this for hundreds of different people across their ecosystem every morning. Really interesting way of using generative AI across data that already existed. The bottom left-hand corner, we all know the Northern Territory has a great sense of humour when it comes to tourism. See you in the Northern Territory. Gotta love them. But they embraced it. They thought, what could we do in this moment with generative AI that is different and fun, but still part of our personality? So they built a chatbot using the personality of Abby Chatfield. Now, if you don't know Abby Chatfield, great. Quite a bright personality. So the chatbot says things like, hey, Gorge, and OMG. And maybe that's not how I want to be talked to by a chatbot, but it's great. It has personality. It reflects the Northern Territory. And so you can go and ask for tourism tips. Where do I go fishing? How do I plan a holiday? And it has this wonderful personality wrapped around it. So again, using generative AI to do something that they would do anyway, but just a little bit differently, a little bit of fun. More seriously, education is seeing such an uptake in this. And I think we can all relate to the fact that teachers are overstretched, that we can't get enough of them into all of the areas where we need them. And so the opportunity to use things like generative AI to create lesson plans, to interact with their students in different ways, to actually create individualized, curated, personal learning journeys is pretty powerful. And so my son has learning challenges, and I've seen him come alive through the use of things like generative AI. He can participate in class in ways he couldn't before. He can't write, and he can use generative AI to help create stories and become an editor and curator of that content, which he couldn't do otherwise. He'd spend an hour-long lesson writing 10 words, and now he can actually participate. So thinking about how it unlocks opportunity for our children and the next generations in fundamentally different ways. And then protecting us all. Most of the banks have been using this in different ways, and you will see it emerging into the way in which you interact with your banks through their interfaces, through chatbots, through risk and fraud protection. Lots of different ways that AI is being adopted. But what I thought I'd do is take a quick look at agriculture. And I spent yesterday at the expo, I saw so many different products out there, which is what inspired the live demo I'm going to attempt. We'll see how we go. Because you have this huge opportunity in front of you, and there is no industry of which so much is being asked of so few. We need more food. How do we feed the people we have in Australia, let alone the world? How do we think about agriculture more holistically and keep this sustainability front of mind and optimize our operations? And so I clearly put way too many animations in. There are lots of different places where this is occurring, and anyone who went to the expo yesterday would have seen almost every single one of these demonstrated in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's genomics and looking at how we produce different seed types, or how we actually look at the genomics of our cattle and our sheep, how we use agricultural equipment. I had so much fun with the robo-dog yesterday and the giant drones, who didn't? Agricultural retail and agronomists. I've been working a lot with New Zealand on some of the things that they're doing in that space. How can they use IoT to determine when vaccinations are at the right temperature or not, and get alerts based on that? Maybe their refrigerators are going down. Oh, see, I'm a crazy clicker. Maybe it's my waving hands. I'm going to put the clicker down until I'm finished talking. Step away from the clicker. But it's really fascinating. It feels like every day there are new innovations coming out. I was reading the news this morning, and there was this article about Fido, which is a new AI tool that can sniff out leaks in your plastic pipes. That's pretty cool. The challenge I think you all face into, though, and I know I certainly do, is there is so much information in so many different places. How do I actually get access to all of this? How do I know which thing I need to look at which point in time? So I'm going to fetch my phone and we're going to give it a go. So if you think you have 10 different systems using 10 different types of AI, and you've got to go to 10 different places for it, that means you're less likely to use it, and you're probably not getting the value out of it you want. So what I'm going to show you is a system that's looking across all of my applications and data. Normally I would have trained it on agriculture, but I didn't have time overnight to do it. So we're going to give it a go. No, I don't want to use the Wi-Fi. I just want to use it without internet. Thank you. Oh, really breaking everything. It's great when the tech officer can't get the tech to work. It's awesome. It's my favorite thing. All right, let's give it a go. She's got an American accent.
Hey, Sarah. How's today treating you? Hope it's been in...
It's great. I'm having a problem with the nectarines I'm growing. The leaves seem to be curling on the plants. What could that be?
leaf curl on nectarines often points to fungal infection like peach leaf curl. Any odd colors on the leaves like reddish or purple? Or maybe you've had a particularly wet or humid season?
Definitely spots on the leaves. What does that mean?
Dark spots, especially if they're raised, could mean you've got a pest issue, like aphids or mites. Any sign of tiny bugs lurking around? If the spots...
Okay, so you get the idea, right? So she's tapping into a body of knowledge that's sitting behind the scenes, and normally what I would do is I'd add a photo image to that as well, so you could get a feel for... She'd look at the picture that I'm showing her and provide insight off the back of that. So that's what I think the future looks like for you, is how do you talk to that data? How do you think about all of those systems in one interface where you can ask questions and it's pulling that insight from every single place? I had a lot of fun with it yesterday. Come and see me, I can show you some of the things it does. This one is really great. I had fun yesterday, I said, with the great big drones. This is me standing in a paddock in New Zealand. I spend a lot of time in New Zealand standing in paddocks. Turns out I'm really good at identifying cows and not rocks. That's what we were trying to do with the drones. The question they had was, we have to do an audit of our cattle. How could we do that with drones? Because right now they walk through paddocks, 3 people with clickers, clicking to count, and they match them all at the end. Nope, I got a different count back. They go again and they do it all again. So I thought, what if we could fly a drone over the field and get a count instantly of what's in that field? And then they were like, what if we could work out how many calves there are in that field? Calving season, we all know how many calves there are. What if we want to know where everybody is? Because, you know, large farms, large holdings, I don't have just one field I have to look at, I have 50 fields. And so this is a great project to take that to the next level and get that instant information that you can action on the ground. And the challenge New Zealand is facing into is limited migration. We can't get enough people to staff the farms, so how can we staff them smarter? How can we get information for that one person? You know, it blew my mind that they're doing the milking on these farms with one person running the entire operation and using technology to augment that. So I thought this was fun, but I thought I'd take you a little bit further. And so there are 2 projects that Microsoft's been working on that I thought I'd share. This one's a little bit crazy. This one's called Project Florence. So we love to collaborate with unusual people. This was a collaboration with an artist in residence. And the idea was, the question they asked is, what if we could talk to trees? And so what they actually built was an interface where the conversation you have is turned into light signals that are then given to the tree. The tree can then give you light signals in return as a response. I know you're all laughing, going, that's crazy, that's not a thing. It was a really fun experiment. And actually what they found is they could have a really good conversation with the tree about lack of water, problems with pests. And so this is the concept they're working on, is into the future, how could you use this kind of technology, which feels so futuristic and crazy, to help you manage and understand the real needs of your plants if you were talking to the plants and not just a sensor in your plants. So that's the first crazy project. The second one, because I love the team's going to debate about whether you should let it rip or not, and these are the kind of projects that you could be thinking about. This one is called Premonition, and this came off the back of Bill Gates has a real passion around malaria. And so his question was, what if we could predict where infections might occur? What if we could predict before it even happens through sensors like this? And so this premonition system actually looks at insects in the ecosystem, it analyzes those insects and provides insights into infections that are occurring in the ecosystem around you and can predict with incredible accuracy chances of infection for humans, for animals, for livestock, for your plants. And so this feels quite future-looking, but is actually a really quite close concept of what AI could do for you in the future. Predict what could happen to your farm, what's about to happen, and the ways in which you could actually mitigate against that. And so, with that, I'm going to hand to our next speaker who's going to inspire you, and then the debate team who's going to bring the passion, and I can't wait for all the questions that you will have on what AI should or should not do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Fascinating to see what the possibilities might be there. Let's again go to the practical side now, and it's my pleasure to introduce Charles Simons. Charles has worked in viticulture in South Africa, New Zealand, California, Germany, Austria and Australia. He's recognised for his innovation integrating cutting-edge technology with traditional techniques and earning him awards such as Viticulturist of the Year in New Zealand and Australia. So he's now the Chief Sales Officer at BioScout, where he's helping others to implement smart tech. And in this case study, he'll share his experience of implementing AI in the vineyard and the journey from skeptic to supporter. Please, a big welcome for Charles.
Thank you so much, Tim, for that introduction, and thank you to the organisers for inviting me to talk about my very short journey through agriculture across the world, and also my involvement now with embracing AI. As Tim mentioned, I am South African. You can probably tell by my accent. I have got a different South African accent because I've been beaten out of me in New Zealand. I studied viticulture and enology at Stellenbosch University many years ago now, and then travelled the world working in California in particular and in Germany. Ended up in New Zealand because what South African doesn't want to go to New Zealand and play rugby, which I did. Got a horrible injury and got short pretty quickly my rugby career, and then focused back on viticulture. Started studying a postgraduate degree in farm management and ag business, and really then got immersed into tech on farms. I was very lucky to work for, probably in my mind, I'm a bit biased, probably one of the most amazing wineries and vineyards, I think, globally, called Craggy Range in Hawke's Bay, New Zealand. I was very lucky to work for them in the beginning when we started expanding across New Zealand, and really got the opportunity to work with all sorts of tech that was quite new. Now it's common in most vineyards. We don't have the fancy big machines that broadacre farmers have got. Everything is tiny and small. But I got to work with things that was new to me. And that brought me across to Australia in 2012 to work for, I think, arguably probably the most amazing winemakers in Australia in modern day, as Philip Shaw. For those that don't know, he was the head winemaker for Rosemount, Lindemans back in the day. He did for Australian wines what Cloudy Bay did for Marlborough Sauv Blanc. They were enormous back in the day. And I got to work with a lot of technologies while working for Philip. And in particular, BioScout came to Orange through a friend of mine, JJ Quickly, from Spark Labs, who's a very good friend of mine. And JJ said to me, do I want to meet these guys in the pub for a beer and talk about tech? And like many in the room, I was like, God, really? I don't really need this. I know what I'm doing. I've studied viticulture. I don't need a box to tell me what's going on. So I'm like many other farmers that decided pretty quickly, I don't believe in this stuff. I can do it myself. But met these guys nonetheless. We started to design the dashboard, decided to design the AI behind the scenes, and BioScout was born to what it is today. And we'll go through it now to kind of give you a background of how we implement AI and what we do. I shifted across with these guys. I am a part owner of the company as well, so I shifted across from my viticulture career to BioScout and now consult back to the viticulture industry. There we go. BioScout started, Lewis Collins, the CEO, did his PhD, and I'm sure most of you guys as an ag uses a lot of the old manual spore units called Burkhards, and those units across the country. But Lewis realized pretty quickly that it's a pretty slow process, because how they work is you basically have to set a station up in the field. It's got, for the lack of a better word, a roll of a sticky tape inside. Spores and pathogens get trapped on that spore tape. Someone's got to go and collect that data, that tape, take it to a lab, analyze it, give the information back. Then you go to the farmer, here's your results, make your decision. And that could take up to 2 to 3 weeks to get that information back. So Lewis worked out pretty quickly that this is not going to work. We need to automate this process. And so we decided to put his engineering and mechatronics skills together, and we launched BioScout successfully now for the last couple of years. For those that don't know, BioScout works in the process where it's a unit that sits in field. That's a very old picture of the unit, but it's completely self-sufficient. It's got its own battery pack, a backup battery pack, solar-powered. It's got telecommunications that we're currently working on with satellites. So at the moment, we rely on GSM or mobile phone networks. But we are going to launch that into satellite phones so we can go anywhere we want. We basically rely on an airflow to come into a confined nozzle space, take air, and then we disperse that pathogens and spores that's in the atmosphere on a roll of sticky tape. Think of the tape like a VHS tape. So it's quite flexible and small. And the glue captures everything, and as it moves along to the camera, it gets sandwiched between another roll of tape therefore protecting that data that we can go and collect that tape if we want to DNA analyze the information on that tape. We analyze the spores, we push it to a dashboard in real time, and the farmer can make a decision right there and then what needs to be sprayed, when he needs to spray, and what he needs to do to protect his crop. For most of us in the room, we all know what that is, and it's a disease triangle of how we manage our farms. And for many years, for me as a viticulturist, and most farmers today, we only focus below the line. You only know the environment and you know your host. And then you make an assumption, oh, but it's raining, so therefore there's disease, so therefore I have to spray. But you do not know what the pathogens are. You don't know what pathogens are in the atmosphere. You don't know what pathogens are in your field. So you're assuming that there's accumulating of pathogens, so therefore you have to spray. And all that equates to is the over-application of chemicals or the under-application of the wrong chemicals at the wrong time, therefore leading to resistance issues. And we're now currently seeing in Moree where there's a huge, I think there's a chemical now, and I won't mention the name, that got brought out 2 years ago, and there's already resistance against that chemical. This is in chickpea farms. So there's already showing of that disease. Now, we know that that isn't true, because how can you decide about the pathogen? But it's the standard. When I came out of university, there was nowhere ever in my studies that told me this is how you spray, this is how you protect your crop. I started working for literally a big South African farmer, and he's probably at least a head longer than I am, taller than I am, and told me from the get-go, do not tell me what you learned at university, I will teach you what to do. And that's what most of us young farmers, when we start, you work for these influential big guys or women as well, and they tell you what to do, and there's no reason why you're doing it, so there was never a challenge for it. Now, from the get-go, BioScout worked on that basis there. The image on the left-hand side is the image that we took. As you saw on the previous slide, AI was there, but it was never trained to do what we wanted it to do. We couldn't go to a shop front, buy that AI, and implement it in our system. We had to train it to do what we wanted it to do. So we've got 4 plant pathologists and biologists in the office that count spores for us. We had to train AI at the same time to find what we wanted to do. As you can see on the right, we started tagging, I think it's Plumeria and Alternaria, and we tagged them as well to train AI, and we used SARDI and CSIRO to help us a lot with spiking these units so we can speed up the process of finding what we wanted to do. That's an image that I took yesterday from a unit just outside Wagga as part of the GRDC network. There's 65 of our units across the eastern and western grain belts. And on the left-hand side, you can see the quality of the imagery that we can take with our microscopy camera. And I told my head of AI, Nick Lillywhite, to tell the system to find me Plumeria, Alternaria, Rust, and Botrytis. And it gave me that slide back within about 5 minutes. And within 5 minutes, I could tell what was going on that farm in one snapshot. So the Plumeria, it's a bit hard to see for me, but hopefully you can. It's that little jelly blob here. That's Plumeria. Alternaria is the little worm banana-shaped one. Rust is obviously very easy. It's a little rust blob on the right-hand side. And there's a teeny tiny box in the middle there that's Botrytis. But it counts that every time. Even if I give the AI that picture again to count, it'll count exactly the same consistently 24 hours a day from that image. The purist in the room, or the scientist, will come to us and say, yeah, but you counted 600 parts. I counted 602. You must be wrong. But if you paid really close attention, one of the Alternaria spores here is so close together that it counted it as 1, not 2. So it's not a mistake. Okay, yeah, we counted 1, not 2, but there is a percentage of wrong and right between human counting as well, because most spore counters will start at 8 in the morning, and they will count non-stop till 5 o'clock. They'll count tags or spores. And at some point, they'll get a phone call, they'll get tired, they'll make a mistake. This doesn't. It keeps on counting the same amount day in, day out, without any other influence. Now, we will always improve with more data. Labeling images like this makes us better every day. There's a saying that we use in the office that the worst we'll ever be at giving you data is yesterday. Because the more we take pictures, the better we get tomorrow. And the more we take pictures in other regions, the better we get at what we do. That's a snapshot of the units currently in Australia and New Zealand. We are in Canada as well, and we are also now launching into Europe. I think in February we sent the first units across to Europe. Now, AI and data in a broad way is what is at the core of BioScout. AI provides us with enormous scale. Originally, as I said, BioScout counted by hand. So now we can quadruple our production that we can count in each day and consistently count that information. AI was the salvation for BioScout, because if we didn't adopt AI, we will be the same as every other system that relies on human error to count that information that we wanted to give to you as a farmer. We are able to capture, I don't know what's going on with the screen there. We're able to capture a niche skill and change the capacity of what we do. Globally, there's a very small amount of people that can count spores very well. And we can use our data to kind of make their job easier, give them the information, and they can verify that for us, which we're currently doing to make sure that we have the right spores and analyzing. So currently, we've got 300,000 spores identified successfully. We've got roughly about 7 million. I did this slide about a week ago. We're now well over 8 million images. And we do about 20,000 images of slides per day, and we analyze them within 24 hours. So each time that 20,000 comes in, we'll analyze them in a day. If you break it down on a tape scan, which is done every 6 hours, it's about that long. That tape scan is split into 220 images, and those images are the size of a USB plug. So if you had to take a football field and press one end to the other, it'll be a football field full of images that we've pushed out over the last couple. This is probably in the last 2 years that we've got these images now. We're industry-wide. So you can see here the eastern and western grain belts. There's a few around Victoria, South Australia. They're mainly in vineyards. We've covered a large portion of this. And as I said earlier, even though that we are across the globe in New Zealand, Canada, Europe next year, we are better at finding grain diseases when we scan more viticulture diseases. We can also find new diseases. If you look at the New Zealand model, we had units in Marlborough, and we started noticing spores on our slides that we didn't know what it was. But the funny thing is they kept moving between stations. So one day we picked it up here. The next day it'll be a couple of 100 meters away, but nothing here on the old station. And we asked the farmer or the winery, were they mulching, were they spraying, what are they doing? Because we only focus on pathogens for crops, in this instance vineyards. And we actually successfully identified facial eczema in sheep, which is obviously a biosecurity risk to Australia. And we didn't intend to find it, we just knew it was there because we could see it. And that kind of made us realize that there's so much more that we can do with our technology being where we are, relying on spores, to give farmers the information that they need. AI is at the core of what we do. There's no fancy frills or nice story that you can turn AI off and use a device without it. It is what we do. We cannot offer you this kind of services if we didn't have AI running in the background. I thought I'd put that slide up because I'm doing a talk in January at the Clean Tech Conference or Clean Tech Forum in North America. And I did this slide for them because we always talk about climate change and what climate does to the environment, but just from microscopic fungal diseases, we lose 20% of global crops just to fungal diseases, which is about $1 trillion US. But the problem is that we spend 20 billion US in producing fungicides and the application of that fungicides, which is 75 million metric tons of CO2 emissions, just in fixing that problem. And if you paid really close attention, there's a bit of a breakage on the screen at the bottom, but the US, which is for them alone, since 92 to 2016, their yield has stayed at 125%, pretty consistent. But since 2006 to 2016, they've increased their fungicide use by 600%, which means there's an over-application of fungicides, there's resistance, they don't know what they're spraying for, but they're spraying because they have to, and they don't know what's going on, what the problem is, because they're missing that pathogen link. And that's where we're trying to make a difference here. If you break this down into a New South Wales form, New South Wales alone produces 12 billion Australian dollars in crops, and we lose 20% of that every year to fungal diseases that we are trying to give you the information to fix. There we are. For me, understanding the scale of the problem and the problem that we're tackling and food security is at its core. The challenge that I gave our team in the office when I started with them so many years ago was that I want to spend more time with my family. And we all know that in agriculture, it takes a lot because you have to be either in a tractor, You're in the field, you're making decisions, you're stressed about the weather, and you're not spending time at home. And I wanted to make a difference. And there's no way that you can take a problem of the magnitude that we are now seeing and doing it manually. It had to be streamlined, mechanized, that we can get the information out quickly. There's this massive ravine also between scientific data and what happens in the real world. And I think that's why we as farmers are sometimes so skeptical to take that information and take on technology, because we always say, oh, but it's never been proven in the real world. And so our challenge here is to give a farmer as much information that we can give him to help him or her make a decision that's going to make a difference. And one of these, this leaf here, so my challenge to our team was to say, I'm sick and tired of using water-sensitive paper. It's the most useless piece of information there is, because unless you get it straight away, the water keeps spreading on the paper. So unless you pick it up within a minute, the water droplets keeps going and it looks better than what it actually was. I want that in a digital form. This is my design, can you make it for me? And Nick, our AI, said, yeah, but you forgot to mention AI. It'll be in there as well. And I thought, God, not again. Like, what are you talking about? And then he started breaking it down in technical terms, how it'll work. And now it's something that just runs that leaf autonomously. So what you see on that leaf are 7 zones, which you can't see with the naked eye. There's 7 zones in the front and 7 zones on the rear of the leaf, and each of them runs independently. So 14 zones across the leaf. It's AI-powered or generated. It is 3D printed, so it's printed in a 3D model. It's got its own solar panel. The battery lasts for about 10 years. It's GPS tracked, but it gives you real information in field. So it gives you water coverage. It gives you humidity, not as a proxy, but as a real leaf wetness. Because us farmers, we rely on leaf wetness to decide risk of disease, but that is based on humidity, not on actual leaf wetness. And for me, when someone says to me a leaf is wet at 85%, but at 83% it's not wet, it makes no sense. Because how can that be possible? No. And this was something that I then said, make me this. So how this works, this with our box, this is in Marlborough, New Zealand. Both of them now, as you mentioned earlier, with how AI will give you a forward prediction, we will now be the ability later this year to switch on a function within our units that, along with this leaf wetness, will give you forward prediction on your disease outbreak risk. So we won't just give you spores now. We'll take weather analysis that you put in what weather app you want to use, whether you use Elders, whether you use YR, whether you use Bureau of Meteorology, whatever app you want to use, you can input that data in there. And it will take that data from the cloud and analyze it and tell you a disease outbreak risk. So it'll go in a 7-day period, and it'll say, if the spore stays where it is now, and this is your weather conditions, this is how your disease risk will look 7 days ahead. This is if it's in perfect condition, this is if it's a worse condition. And you can base your spraying based on that information in real time. We'll also turn on a functionality where all your spray inputs will automatically be uploaded into the system, so you can see your efficacy on spore loads by your application of chemicals. So you can see whether there's a resistance against your chemicals or there should be a drop in when you spray your chemicals. I did this in New Zealand as a trial, so it's trialed now for the 2nd year in New Zealand, and it's also trialed at Queensland University into their strawberry field. So what I didn't show is that leaf will be cut into any shape we want to have it in. So whether it goes into strawberries, canola, cotton, the leaf will be cut to fit that same crop to give you the information. So it's not always going to stay a vine leaf. This stays in the canopy, so it gives the operator of that unit real-time canopy information, what goes on. And with AI, with a spore count, it gives you the information that you need to make a decision on what your outcomes are. How I used AI, water-sensitive paper to trial the initial leaf to see what's wet. And I used an AI analysis out of the United States to work out how much percentage of that leaf was wet. Now, if you pay really close attention, if that was my farm, I would say, oh, that's pretty good. I'm happy with that spray coverage. It's even, it's all over the leaf. But only 42.52% of that block is actually wet. There's a huge amount of that little block that's not wet. And so therefore, how can that be good spray coverage? Because then someone will come out and say, oh, but you've got to up your water rate. And I was like, well, no, it's not always upping water rate, it's speed as well. How fast are you going? And in real time, you can now use this data And you can see on the bottom left-hand side, I'll go to the next slide, it's a bit bigger. I've now used AI to work out what percentage of each of those leaves, that paper, is wet. Now, each of them represent a back and a front, same as the leaf. And you can see the percentage breakdown in each of them. So what I now do is I bring this along with our units, our Spore Scout information that we give you through AI, and give you in the cab. You sit in the tractor or on the farm, or if you, let's say, a grower out at Moree, I use Moree as an example, and you use a contract sprayer, and your farm is that big, you can't be there. I know what it's like when you pay a contractor. It's always like, did he actually spray? Because I'm paying him all this money, and there's an empty chemical drum, but I don't know how good the application was. With this, I can see in real time what's happening. But what I've done now also is load the actual disease outbreak on each of those discs. So each of them, on that first picture, is a back and a front. So where the 80 is here on the row 4, 80 is the leaf that faced the sprayer. 16 is the back of the leaf that he still has to come around and spray again. And the color relates to the disease outbreak. So if it's green, that amount of spray coverage, with that amount of spore load in the atmosphere, with that weather conditions, that's going to give you good protection. If you spray only the red, you are not protecting your crop. You are going to get a disease outbreak because there's not enough moisture or chemical particles on that leaf to actually protect your crop going forward. And so, as I said earlier, for me it was all about understanding how can I make farmers' lives easier. I want to spend more time with my family. I've got a young family, and I want to make sure that I can be less hours in there and more at home. And I'm going to leave you with the last picture, which for me is something that I've always wanted to have kids, and to be able to finally have kids was the slide that I think, for me, sums it up. And I love big tractors, right? So I put that on there. But you can either choose option A, do things the normal way you got told and spray because you have to, or option B, use AI to detect spores along with weather data to predict outbreaks and only spray when necessary. I'll choose option B every day. Thank you.
Well done to Charles. Just a fascinating presentation. And Charles, I didn't ask, does that mean we get better quality wine and cheaper wine because of this? It's a self-interest there at... Well, a few weeks ago on Landline, I did a story on artificial intelligence, and of course I said AI. I was on Facebook, on the Landline Facebook, and of course, smart Alex are going to say, oh, AI is really avian influenza, or AI is actually artificial insemination. And I was like, oh yeah, I know that. And so I was even able to say to one person who cleverly said that, yes, I've even performed that operation, artificial insemination on cows. So I'm across that joke, but thanks for your input, sort of thing. Anyway, so today here, and we're going to have a bit of fun because we've heard much about its potential, much about its application, and some wonderful examples. But I suppose the ethical question then about, as you put to me earlier, should we let this stuff rip? What are the constraints? What are the pros and cons? What are the dangers, I guess? And just to update you too, on the Slido, we now have the Let It Rip Brigade. You rippers are up to 38%. The Maintain Control, the control group, are 51%. And there's 11% of you, according to the latest data, unsure where it sits. So this is the idea of the debate. And it's going to be a fascinating little discussion. So we've got two teams, and it's going to be run along traditional debating lines. So one, of course, are the pro let it rip, and the others are no, let's put the brakes on this thing. So each team, of course, will take either side. The arguments each speaker puts forward may not necessarily be their own personal views as well, professional or organisations' position on AI. So just be aware if someone says something totally controversial, don't go quoting them as, look at this outrageous bloke from Monash Uni saying this. It's not, we are having a bit of a hypothetical. And I'll be the moderator. I've got a glass of water here which I'll use as a ting, 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 ting. So, because we've got to run pretty strictly to time on this one. So I'll be giving you a few speakers a ting along there. So I'd like to welcome to the stage the Let It Rip Brigade, Charles Sturt University AI and Cyber Futures Institute Executive Director, Ganna Pogrebna. Ganna, if you could come up. And she brings a background in behavioural science, AI, data analytics and computer science to her lectern today. And we have Jerome on this side, Jerome Leray, and Jerome is committed to delivering solutions to farmers that increase productivity, resilience and sustainability. And Jerome's the founder of agricultural AI company InFarm, so look out for that as well. To the stage, if I could get the maintain control team, come up in an orderly, controlled fashion. Monash Data Futures Institute Professor Rob Sparrow, and Rob's work focuses on the ethical issues raised by new technologies like robotics and AI. And the CEO of Riker Global, Nguyen, and V works with organisations to prepare them for a tech future and has more than 20 years' experience within the digital and technology industry, specialising in digital transformation and AI. And as I say, I did a story on AI a couple of weeks ago, and V very nicely said it was a good story, but having heard some of the stuff today, I'm not sure it was. I'm not sure I did a comprehensive enough job. But anyway, I knew today coming along there'd be half a dozen people who would have great examples of AI. So as I say, we've got to be strictly on time. There is a big clock up the front here to keep you guys in check. Okay. And I've got to flip a coin to see who goes first. So V, you're closest to me, you can call. So heads or tails?
We'll do heads.
Any heads? And it is tails. You've lost the toss.
Oh, okay.
It is the Let It Rip Brigade to go. And I think you've been aware of the time constraints, haven't you? So you've read the rules of the Keynote. So I'll let you get away. So Ganna, if you'd like to kick off, please.
Can I get the slide, please? Thank you. AI is not here to take over. It's here to assist. AI is a tool. We are regularly going out since 2013 and asking Australians what they think about AI. And what do you know? People, pre-ChatGPT, people were all thinking about Terminators. You know, and you would have thought that with pandemic and post-ChatGPT, the picture would have changed. But about 86% of Australians, I think, are still thinking about Terminators when we ask them about AI. So, but I just want you to think about this, how hypocritical we are. Actually, 94% of Australians on a regular basis for 5 hours a day engage with AI-assisted tools. Every time you Google something, there are hundreds of AI algorithms working behind the scenes. So your decisions are affected by algorithms today. Moreover, yesterday from Microsoft, I heard that 73% of people in Australia are bringing their own AI to work. And that's affecting their decisions today. Our opponents usually scare us with, Terminators coming and killing everybody. But let's face it, first of all, we haven't developed self-aware machines that will be able to do that. That's first thing. Second thing, if we had developed them, they would probably be asking for a raise and not killing people on farms. Another thing is, AI can help us solve really important problems that we are facing today, problems such as global hunger, problems such as food security, problems such as climate change. And we need to be thinking about that, thinking how the technology can assist. My team has brought a range of technologies yesterday to the expo. We're working with drones, we're working with robotic dogs. We just saw brilliant examples from the 2 speakers today about how AI is helping the farms today. We know that by 2030, AI is going to create 150,000 jobs in this country. That's something that we need to think about. Well, there are 2 ways to make a business a success. And I speak from experience because I advise businesses for the last 20 years. It's insight and operational efficiency. Insight always comes from the human. It never comes from the machine. But operational efficiency always comes from automation. It's always the automated component. So what we need to do is we actually need to combine human and machines. And we need to embrace that. So all of you, each one of you, you are working in a human-machine team. You are leading a human-machine team. But as long as you're thinking about Terminators, you're holding yourself back. So what we need to do is we need to embrace technology to ensure that all the emerging technologies and data that feeds them actually help us to insert the human values into the very development of these technologies and ensure that we are supporting rural and regional communities, communities like your community, businesses like your business today. I'm done.
Thank you, Ganna. Okay, the control side. Would you like to put your argument forward, please?
I've been researching and writing about the ethical and policy issues associated with AI and robotics for the last 25 years. For the last 3 years, I've been working on an Australian Research Council funded project on public attitudes towards robotics and AI in agriculture. We've heard a lot about the potential of AI over the past day and a half, and we've had a good definition earlier, so I'm not going to speak to that. I would mention that some of the things that AI does are not necessarily immediately visible to people. AI makes robotics work, particularly the machine vision on the robots. Some of the most impactful consequences of AI for agriculture are probably coming from outside of the sector, particularly the share market that prices food is all run by AI nowadays. If we ever see completely driverless trucks, that will have a huge impact. AI-driven logistics is important, genomics is important. There's a lot going on here. I am terribly excited about these technologies. I am an enthusiast for AI and robotics. But if there's one thing I've learnt, I think these are really like world-shaping technologies. But if there's one thing I've learnt studying this stuff, is it's precisely the power of these technologies that means that we need to make decisions consciously and sensibly about them. To help you see that, I want you to do a short visualization exercise with me. I want you to imagine you're at home with the family, watching television, and the screen goes on the fritz, and all of a sudden there's an old school 1970s urban gorilla on the screen, balaclava, AK-47, and they say, "Welcome to the revolution." And then they say, "Our revolution will change the world. It will radically reshape the practice of agriculture. It will put tens of thousands of people out of work. It will change the character of rural communities. It will transform the experience of farming, allowing farms to be run from offices in town and indeed from overseas. It will lead to bigger farms and more foreign ownership. It will put power in the hands of technocrats and machines that we can't and sometimes we don't and sometimes can't understand. This revolution will have winners and losers. The future is bright, but some people will need to go to the wall." In short, that person says everything that enthusiasts for AI say about the impact of AI in agriculture. And when you hear that, do you think, let it rip? Or do you think, actually, I want to say in that future? The first argument for control, then, is simple. People have a right to have a say about the world they will live in the future, and farmers have a right to have a say about the future of agriculture. Now, control doesn't mean Big Brother. It means ethics, it means policy, it means industry self-regulation, it means standards, and all of these things are vital to progress in the development of technologies. As we'll argue later, you can't have technology development without regulation, without public trust. So if we want to see a future in which the benefits of AI and the potential of AI are realised, we need public trust. We need standards, we need access to good information, we need interoperable systems, we need to overcome the siloing of data. All of this requires good regulation, good policy, and control. Letting it rip is a recipe for the failure of this technology. It's a recipe for loss of public trust, leading to people to reject it. So if you want to see the benefits of AI realised for agriculture, we need good policy, we need some regulation, we need control.
And Rob just spoke exactly for 4 minutes there, which is a bit freaky, but well done. Okay, so let's hear from team one. What's holding the industry back from embracing AI? You've got 1 minute.
So one of the things that you need to consider when you're talking about artificial intelligence in the agricultural system is we need to understand the context of the farmer. Now, a typical farmer will inherit the farm at 30, retire at 60. That's 30 years to make their lifetime worth of income. Considering they get one grain crop or one cow a year, that's 30 income moments to be able to do that. As salary or people with salary, in 1.5 years, you'll have more income moments than a farmer will have on the lifetime of their operation. Now consider that 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 years is typically the amount of time that it takes for a farmer to make a windfall kind of income or have an income moment. And so that means that technology or changing the way that we operate may affect 1/30th of the income earning potential of an individual. And so when people are complaining that farmers don't adopt technology fast enough, we've got to ask ourselves, is this technology better than 30% of their lifetime's worth of income? Is it worth that risk? And so there is an inherent natural cycle to the adoption of technology. Farmers will typically do a plot trial, do a strip trial, do a paddock trial, and then they'll implement it. That's 4 years worth of adoption of that technology. A typical startup will have about 18 months worth of runway before they go poof. And maybe that's just nature saying, get rid of the ones that aren't valuable. But what we need to demonstrate is this true value, and that dislocation, although it might seem like the problem, is actually the opportunity and the reason why we don't need to constrain this. We've got this natural inbuilt mechanism or safety mechanism in the way that farmers adopt it. We often hear about trust. AI is a probabilistic system. It takes different probabilities from different ways and tries to say what is the best course of action or the probable best course of action. It's not deterministic. It doesn't say do this or else. It's something that takes something from a probability to an action. And at the end of the day, that's what a farmer does. They take those billions of different variables and then determine what needs to happen based on the data and based on the history of the system. The other one is actually the lack of access to this technology on farm. Big data, artificial intelligence. How do you do that when you don't even have internet? The ability and the restraint that we have around the infrastructure is another big problem. Around the fact that our technology, our farm equipment are not actually AI enabled. And that cycle takes about 10 years to go through from a farmer buying a new piece of machinery to getting the new machine. That's 10 years. So we've got 4 years to adopt, 10 years to get the adoption cycle from the technological point of view. We've got AI and big data and assume that the big nerds can solve how we do that and deliver that on farm. That's still 14 years before we see the next wave of AI embedded into our farming ecosystem. Lastly is the energy cost. Australia is not ready for this. It's estimated that around about 7% of the entire energy is actually going to be used for training and deploying AI systems. If we increase the demand on our systems by 7% for artificial intelligence, I think that we would... There's a bunch of problems with that, I suppose. I won't get too political on that front. Now, it might sound like I'm actually giving you a case why AI will never work in agriculture, and that's just simply not true. What I'm saying is that we have these natural inbuilt mechanisms, these safety valves, for us to be able to adopt and deploy this technology. 14 years is a long way to make sure we're getting it right. 14 years is a long way to develop and prove the trust, not only to the farmer, to the consumers, but to everyone in the world that we can adopt this technology. And it's for that reason I say, let it rip.
Thank you, Jerome. Okay, so our control team have 1 minute now to rebut what you've just heard there. 1 minute.
Our opponents seem confused as to what this debate is about. We're not against AI in agriculture. We think we need good regulation, good standards, investment, forms of control precisely to realise this technology. We think just removing all the barriers, letting it rip is a recipe for disaster. And look, 14 years to discover the thing doesn't work, we can ill afford that. We need sensible investment, including investment in public infrastructure, which is itself a form of control. We need farmers to be able to rely on the fact that when they put their money into these products, that they're well designed, that they're trustworthy, and they will do the job that they're supposed to. All of that requires regulation, standards, and control, not letting it rip. Thank
you, Rob. Now, with those words ringing in your ears, it's the control team's turn to put what is holding the industry back from embracing AI. So, V.
Do you want to control AI, or do you want AI to control you? My name is V, and I'm for maintaining control. Why? Well, imagine going to a soccer game, you have 5 balls and no rules. Rules make the game possible. It makes it fair, and it protects us against known risks. Rules don't slow down innovation. It actually allows it to flourish. Letting it rip is like having a rogue player on the field that breaks the rules and says, oops, I'm sorry, that destabilizes the game and doesn't make it fun for anyone. This is the same situation we're facing with AI in ag. AI in ag will be a $4 billion industry by 2026. We will see the market change rapidly, companies appearing and disappearing, data being shared locally and also globally, visibility, control, transparency probably won't even exist. Unless we keep it under control, people will be fatigued, give up on this technology, lose interest, and the public will lose faith. I've been working in digital transformation AI in governments, startups, corporations for over 20 years in Australia, Sweden, and in Vietnam. I've seen taking a let-it-rip approach leads to really, really poor results. However, the really successful projects, organisations, and industries innovate with structure and boundaries. Take adoption of AI in banking and defence, for examples. Whilst there are plenty of reasons why letting it rip holds back the industry, I'll keep it to 3 key points. The first one, what we heard a lot about yesterday, was creating real benefits to the users. If we let it rip, we could be exposing ourselves to badly designed products, dodgy data being used from overseas, unchecked recommendations, products that are designed with a short-term view, not considering the long-term benefits to farmers and consumers. What we are seeing is an influx of technologists who are riding the hype of AI and don't understand the cycles and the long-term commitment that is required in agriculture. Having some clear frameworks for identifying the true benefits and value of technology will allow us to be confident in the products we are buying and the relationships we are entering into. Second, AI is still relatively immature. Risks and unintended consequences are unknown. To Jerome's point before, a lot of farmers, you only have, what did you say, 30 income moments, around 30 or 40 of those moments. So that's not many opportunities to get it wrong. It takes years, decades, and generations to build trust, and we're expecting the industry to trust AI instantly. We need to conduct appropriate risk assessments, mitigate unintended consequences, and quickly learn. If controls are not put in place to do this, farmers will either stop using it or not even start. And finally, without the right controls, farmers will be really vulnerable to biased data, manipulated decisions, and not understanding the rationale or reasons for the recommendations. What if AI recommends decisions on their own? What if the decisions impact not only ourselves, but the rest of the supply chain? Will our misjudgment and error hold up in the court of law? Letting it rip will expose us at a scale you and I can only imagine. So if we leave agriculture or AI in agriculture unchecked and let it rip, the future could be beyond us and dictated by algorithms, not humans. We must, I think, demand a level of control to critically assess the inputs as well as the outputs, to empower and protect the ability of farmers and the community to control AI rather than to be controlled by it.
Thank you, V. Now, the Rippers, you've got a minute to counteract that, and then onto the debate. So, who'd like to step forward?
Yep, that'll be me.
Jerome?
This idea that AI's bias is something that sometimes amuses me a little bit. We pretend like we have no bias, and I'm going to run through a bit of an example. I live in Gundawindi. I look like a farmer. Would you imagine that I'm actually an immigrant that came? My mum came from Africa, from Kenya. My dad came from France, and I came there. There's biases just by looking at me that you may assume. So the fact that there are biases in AI or there are biases in humanity is not something new, but all of a sudden it's codified in code and that becomes a problem. The reality is AI is trained on the data sets that it has seen, and it's not very good at generalising. We had the Chihuahua and the muffin example earlier today. The other one is around giving the decisions for farmers, and it's particularly for this reason that I trust farmers. They know and understand what is good for them, what is good for the environment, and what is good for the future of their farms. It's by giving them the control to decide what AI they use and not that I believe that we can really unlock the true utilisation and the trust in this technology.
That's just a rebuttal, so well done. That was 14 seconds extra, which is what V got a minute ago. So you're going really well, you guys, on time.
I was way...
I know, I assisted. So now, the Rippers, you got to put your 4 minutes worth of what comes first, the technology or the regulation?
Thank you. AI is a tool. It's a little bit like a knife, right? You can use a knife to cook a fantastic dinner, but you can also use a knife to kill somebody. But it is a tool. So, and basically, this is the slide that I always show my students. We lived through 3 industrial revolutions already. We will survive this one. And trust me, there were people, even people that you see here, who actually were saying, let's regulate the hell out of it, and let's be skeptical about this. Why control is an illusion? Well, you guys are incredibly dependent on technology. Imagine that everything that dependent on technology didn't work for you today. You wouldn't be here today. You wouldn't be here in this room. You would be doing something else. When we look at the regulation, let's just take an example of drones on farms. Jerome here managed to decrease the herbicides by 97.5% on farms using technology. Drone technology. Imagine if we really regulated drones, we would never be able to get here. We would never be able to get these results. Like our opponents here who said that they're not against technology, I'm not against regulation. I advise several European governments on AI regulation. I also wrote a chapter in Oxford Handbook of AI Ethics. So I probably should be standing on the other side. But when it comes to regulation, my belief is the devil is in the detail. So let's look at those details. When my uncle has a big farm, and when he decided to build roads, he first looked where people were going around his property, and then he built the road. And we have many examples, for example, nuclear or airspace, where self-regulation happened before people regulated. Let's look at some of the regulations and what they've done for us so far. Well, the AI Act in Europe ranks chatbots as more risky technology than facial recognition. Who did the research on this? I don't think anybody actually produced any good research. Am I on? Sorry. Any good research on this topic. We don't really know that. We know chatbots killed several people, but facial recognition didn't kill anyone. General Data Protection Act just jumped at regulation and wrote the right to be forgotten, but we cannot enforce it because we have blockchain technology where nothing is forgotten. So, clearly the business incentive and the regulation didn't go in the same direction here. Let's look at Australian case, right? The regulation that we have in Australia is Australian Privacy Act. This is a regulation from 1988. So 36 years later, we're sitting in this room, and I don't see anybody saying, oh, we have to regulate right now, right? We're doing fine. And trust me, like I said, we're going to survive this industrial revolution. When I was little, I wanted to be an Iron Man. And why I wanted to be an Iron Man? Because he has Jarvis, just a very intelligent system that helps him. Jerome actually developed Farvis, which is Jarvis for farms. This is a really cool tool. But if you don't embrace technology, you have no chance of becoming an Iron Man. So what I have to say to you, don't be a tosser. Don't toss away those emerging technologies. Be the Iron Man.
Okay, control team, you have a minute to rebut that. Who's stepping forward?
Take the the point about tools first. It's a terrible mistake to think that tools are neutral. Okay, tools have what's called affordances. They have politics. They're good for some things, bad for others. Knives don't make good pillows. You can't store water in them. They're not pipes. They're good for stabbing things, and they're good for cutting, and they're good for some things. And because of that, they bring certain problems into the foreground, and they shape the behaviour of their users. Now, one of the big questions about AI is actually, what are its affordances? How does this technology shape us? One thing we know at the moment is it looks like an immensely centralising technology. It works using big data, and it encourages surveillance. So there's a worry there that requires regulation. Not every regulation is good regulation, but without regulation, we simply won't be able to live with these technologies.
Thank you, Rob, for the rebuttal there. And now the control team makes their case. So, V, I think you've got 4 minutes. Is it Rob or V?
Okay. So what comes first, technology or regulation? The answer to this question is easy and obvious. Regulation comes first. You can't develop and you can't use, and you certainly can't sell technology without regulation. Now, regulation is compatible with the free market. In fact, regulation makes the free market possible. Without courts, without contract, without enforcement mechanisms, you actually can't buy and sell goods at all. So I'm just going to run through all of the regulations, all of the forms of control that need to be in place if we want to see Australia develop and flourish with a wonderful AI ecosystem and to reap the benefits of AI for agriculture. So that means strong protection for IP. We can argue about the details of IP, but people who are kind of, anarchists about regulation, and it's really weird when it comes to big corporations, all of a sudden everyone's an anarchist. If you let it rip, people simply won't develop these products because they'll be ripped off. Okay, people need the protection of intellectual property in order to develop the products, in order to gather the data sets. We need courts and enforceable contracts. If someone takes your money and doesn't give you the tractor, you need government. Eventually you need the police to get remedies. If they make false claims, you need to be able to take them to court. We need financial regulation. Farms and agricultural corporations need access to finance, and the financial system needs to be regulated. Most people aren't going to be able to understand it. They're immensely vulnerable to what happens in that industry, and it needs to be regulated. We need consumer law. Consumers need to know that the food that they purchase is safe and nutritious and isn't made by trashing the planet. And they increasingly want to know how it is produced. Products need warranties, so you need to be able to know what to do if the thing breaks. We need labour law. Workers need to be able to work safely with machines. We need good occupational health and safety. One of the dark secrets of automation is it tends to actually create repetitive labour that injures people. The more we introduce machines, the more we introduce production lines, the more the role of the human being shrinks to the things that machines can't do, which is often actually just using your hands at the moment. So we need to protect workers. Traditionally on a production line, you keep people safe by walling off all the robots from the people. You keep the robots and the people separately. Field robotics, agricultural robotics are really challenging from a safety point of view. We need good regulation. We need national security legislation. There are risks in having your vital infrastructure all reliant on one IT system, and we've seen some debates about that in Australia. And we need standards. People need to know that the machine will work in their environment, and this is a real issue in Australia where a lot of this tech is going to come in from overseas. It will be developed using data sets that aren't appropriate to the Australian context, might have a different plug on it unless you've regulated. And designers need to know about the environment in which they're building these things. As we heard earlier, trade relies on standards. People need to know a whole lot of stuff about the quality of the goods that they're buying and selling, and that requires inspectors, regulators, verifiable information. This is especially important for data because you need to know where the data comes from. Hopefully you can transfer it from one application to another. People aren't going to make their data available if they think it's going to be stolen from them and used against them. If your tractor is gathering information about your soil chemistry and selling that to the people from whom you buy fertilizer, you're in deep trouble. And ultimately, we need trust. And trust, as actually the whole previous session, was all about the importance of regulation to make technology possible. So if we want AI to work, we need good facilitative regulation. It's a precondition for this technology. Letting it rip is a recipe for disaster. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. It's up now. Thank you. Righto, let it rip. You've got a minute to debunk or
thank you.
counter.
Just want us to talk about two cautionary tales. The devil is in the detail, right? No one is against regulation per se. So on the day when the GDPR law, European law, was passed, Google got sued. But that's okay, because Google can put aside 1 billion in legal fees and deal with that. But small farms cannot do that. So regulation really benefits the large corporations compared to SMEs. And second cautionary tale I have for you is this. So think about cyber criminals. So when cyber criminals break into somebody's system and demand ransom in Europe, they demand 4% of annual revenue. Why do you think that is? This is because in GDPR law, we have that if you don't report a cyber attack, you have to pay 4% of your annual revenue. So think about what you write in the regulations, guys. Bad guys read laws too, not just good guys. So benefit business.
So the next question, and it's back to the Let It Rip team to put their case. What are the costs of letting it rip versus maintaining control? Who pays and when? So put your case, please. Let it rip.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I think it's important to understand what is the goal of agriculture. It's to produce more quantity, more quality, high density in terms of food nutrition, more sustainably, doing it with less resources and at a cost that most people can afford in the world. At the end of the day, we're here to feed and clothe the world. And when we get away from remembering the core purpose of agriculture, we forget those who are actually affected by the decisions that we make. There are more people in the world every single year, and personally, I think that's wonderful. I love humans. I look at the people that are in this room. I go and talk to farmers regularly. I really enjoy humans, and I want to see more of us on this planet. We also need to figure out a way to do more with less. And at the end of the day, a farmer is an environmental artist, a scientist, and a chronic gambler on the weather. They try to measure, quantify, and sometimes predict what's going to happen in the future from different variables. And then they make a decision. They make a determination that this is what I'm going to do based on the information that I have now. Imagine if only there was a technology that could take disparate data sets, that could measure the quantity of rain that's falling, where that water is going, how much of that might be infiltrating, to name one variable. Imagine we can do that across all the billions of variables that affect a farmer and be able to provide a way to say, hey, these are the variables based on the history of data that we think are going to affect your gross margin or sustainable gross margin per hectare over the long run. Imagine if we could run scenarios, testing different solutions or different strategies to be able to identify what is the best course or least risky option to be able to take. And that's some of the work that can be done in the ag twin environment. And so the cost of waiting, the cost of restricting is actually inhibiting the grassroots applications of this technology. It's not only a potential financial burden to our producers, but a financial burden to those who can actually least afford to have rising costs of food production and clothes production. There's a cost on the environmental side. If we can do more with less, we can be better. And so by not acting, we are actually saying that this environmental degradation or improvement is okay with us. We are also looking at that from a global point of view, that we're in a competitive market. People are not waiting for us to adopt this technology. They're doing it, and they're going to go and continue to do this. If we don't pay attention and we don't act, we are actually signing up to hunger, to growing inequality, and looking at that environmental degradation. The fact of the matter is that producers in Australia have some of the oldest soils, the most variable climates, and they have the highest labour costs. That doesn't sound very enticing to go farming, but it's actually one of the main reasons that they've been innovating and leading the world globally. If we stop doing that, we will not have food production in this country, and we will not be competitive globally because everyone else will be doing this. We'll become the mine of the world, where we're extracted, pilfered, and we will not have a future. Life, which is what farmers give and grow every single day, will cease to exist, and the mining industry will literally be the main thing that is driving this generation. I don't think that that is the future that I want, and I want to make sure that we are not only competitive, that we are continuing to lead agricultural production and the innovative way of doing things more with less, because that's what the standard of Australia is, and that's what it should be into the future. And so I think we need to let this technology rip to make sure that we see that future.
Thank you, Jerome. So the chance of rebuttal now. What are the costs of letting it rip versus maintaining control for the control side? You've got 1 minute to rebut, please.
Again, we're for this technology. We just think that if we want it to happen, it needs to be done in a sensible, progressive fashion so that people can trust it and use it and know what's going on. There is lots of hype about AI. There's a lot that we don't know about how it works and whether it works. And if people are just left alone in an environment where people are making all sorts of grandiose claims about how wonderful their prediction engine is, and then farmers rely on it for 14 years, and it turns out actually that algorithm wasn't a good algorithm, there was some variable that was left out, that's going to be disastrous for farmers. It's hard to run experiments in farming, and a lot of this stuff isn't trialled properly. So people need to be able to trust it. That means that we need an institutional context where manufacturers are held to account for themselves, the claims are backed up by good science, there's public investment in infrastructure that's required to make this stuff work, all of which requires maintaining control.
Thank you, Rob. And your side gets to 4 minutes to now expand upon that argument.
Ganna is right, that diagram that you had up there. We will survive, but the difference is in that progress there, the step from step 3 to 4 is actually exponential. It's a lot more than what we're actually used to, and we don't know how fast it will actually be. So we will survive, but we just don't know what that progress or pace will be. And the cost of letting that rip will be insurmountable, not just financially, but socially, economically, and geopolitically. And who pays? It'll be you, me, the environment, our children, and generations of plants, animals, and humans yet to come. There's so many costs to letting it rip. Let's see how many I can fit in 3 minutes. The first one is the cost of losing trust by going too hard too early. We have seen countless examples across industries where people are going too hard too early with new technology without the right quality checks, and it fails, taking years to recover. Just think or take robo-debt as an example. Number 2, we must address the ethical costs. Letting it rip has the potential to accelerate existing issues in intensive farming, including animal welfare, environmental degradation. It can also contribute to social injustice and prioritising distribution of goods to areas of wealth and possibly discriminating against the lower socioeconomic areas. Being able to contain these ethical risks will be vital to preserve a base standard and expectation of animal and human welfare and equality in society. 3, there are huge savings and efficiency gains. Yes, you're right. We can definitely do more with less through automation, though the benefits are not always equally distributed. So smallholder farmers may actually lack the resources and training to implement these technologies effectively. They may be able to adopt the technology quickly and gain significant benefits, but large companies will have so much more scale, capacity, funding, and keep evolving and potentially manipulate or change the kind of data and decisions that it makes. If we do not maintain some level of control and collaborate, which we heard a lot about yesterday, we risk the widening of the digital divide between large agribusinesses and large companies to small-scale farmers and Indigenous practices. 4, well, we will be, I guess, cease to exist if we do let it rip. We will be really vulnerable to decisions about our critical infrastructure because a lot of these tools are being made overseas. So if you look at AI tech, a lot of them's coming from the US or from China. A lot of that is depending on models from data from those areas as well, and they may actually be built on data that is not suited to our context. Connecting everything, we become dependent on these foreign technologies, and without the right level of assessments, we're exposing ourselves to the risks of bias, cybersecurity, and network vulnerabilities. If farmers and our users have no reason to trust the infrastructure, they will not use it. 5, finally, we all pay the cost of a fragile system, especially when it fails. Exposing us to unnecessary vulnerabilities, cyber attacks, biohacking, data manipulation, it just takes one small vulnerability to infiltrate the system to have a wide-spreading impact. The cost could really bring down the agriculture supply chain. I mean, you can just think about COVID and how that whole COVID freezed our supply chain. So to guard us against these risks, we need institutions, governments, industries to really consider the implications across the whole system and not just about the individuals. Letting it rip will only accelerate these costs in directions that we have no idea exists even now. Maintaining control will ensure we build an ecosystem that gains the full benefits of AI in agriculture and build something that we can actually trust.
Thank you, very well put. And I think a show of hands for that one. That's terrific. So to let it rip, you've got 1 minute just to counter that statement. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I heard it's hard to run experiments to know if it works. Do we know if it works? How do we know if it works? And only the big guys will be able to use AI in the farming ecosystem. Running billions of experiments and figuring out what might work is literally the reason that AI exists. It is the very thing that can actually solve this problem, the ability to run these billions of different scenarios and figuring out what probably might work. Do we know if it works? I don't know if you've met many farmers, but they are the most pragmatic people at telling you whether or not something actually worked in the paddock. It is not binary whether or not that weed died. It's yes or it's no, and they will tell you. The other one is that the big people are the only people that will be able to use this AI. By regulating, we're going to actually increase the cost of that adoption, and so that means those grassroots efforts will be cut off and shorn down. And we talk about trust. Algorithms don't lie. They just tell us that we weren't good enough at feeding the right data in to get the answer. So it's actually a us problem, not an AI problem or an algorithm problem. So.
Thank you, Chief Ripper. Now, you get the chance to call this time because V called last time. So this is for the right to go last, have the final say. So, and we're calling, it's heads. Heads we win. So do you like to go last or in the debate? First or last?
We'll go last.
You'll go last, okay. I thought that was a predictable answer. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, both sides now have 2 minutes to sum up, to make their final convincing pitch to you, the audience, about let it rip or let's keep the genie, put it back in the bottle, or at least constrain the bottle.
If you're excited about AI, you should be on our side. Letting it rip risks farmers turning against this technology and risks the public losing faith in it. Because AI is going to change the world, we all deserve a say in that future.
And AI will be our greatest tool and also our greatest vulnerability. Our fellow debaters here did a wonderful job at arguing letting it rip the agenda, but fundamentally it's still flawed. By letting it rip, we'll still be sitting on the edge of the seats, not knowing what, how, or when things will unfold. By maintaining a balanced level of control, we'll create a stable foundation for AI to flourish, not just technically, but socially, economically, and environmentally. In the rush to revolutionize agriculture, let's not forget what really matters. AI serves communities, not companies. By letting it rip, we are risking the community that supports our $71 billion industry and our bedrock for food security. Essentially, we are inviting more players who breaks the rules on the soccer field and expecting a harmonious and fair game. So here's to keeping it under control.
Thank you, V. So your final summation in 2 minutes, please, Rippers.
Rippers, love it. Our fellow debaters have made some fantastic points. I typically find when people think about the spectrum of letting it rip and regulate it so it doesn't go anywhere, depending on where you land in that spectrum, gives me and tells me a lot about the type of person you are. If you believe in people and like people, you'll generally start to tend towards the let it rip a little bit more, then we need to close it down completely. The reality is AI is going to change the world, and we're not talking about StarNet. We're talking about tools that are going to help us make decisions and work with us into the future. And there has been no time that is better than this time to see the future. We can literally get the experts in the world, digitise their knowledge and democratise that and provide that to every single producer around the globe. We have the ability to go and actually go from the producer to the consumer through the internet and technology. And artificial intelligence is going to be one of those main stays of that technology. AI won't happen overnight. We've got these natural mechanisms that allow us to prove that it works through time. We've got the opportunity and we've got a lot of that slow adoption that people criticise farmers for. It's actually one of our biggest, most amazing things that we can leverage in terms of this adoption. It reminds me of a story in terms of having good humans. I was in a paddock with a farmer and he goes, "My father ploughed this paddock with a horse. My father got the tractor. I got the GPS and the start of the robotic revolution. My son is taking precision agriculture to new heights. And my grandson is going to have AI and the world's expert in his pocket. Let's not kneecap that next generation. Let's let it rip because we really are here to change the world and we need this technology."
All right, let's take a deep breath now, especially you guys up here debating, because it's pretty hard work under the glazing lights. But what an extraordinary effort. Now, I'm just going to do a thing. I know you've voted on Slido, a lot of you, but let's have a show of hands, and I'll ask Sarah, because you do with data. Can you just verify that my count is right? Let's see a show of hands for the let it rip. Who's sort of in favour of the let it rip? Righto, and let's go the control. Sarah, I need your help here. Who's ahead?
I hate to say it, I feel like it's leaning slightly to the control side.
Okay, that's not Microsoft. That's just Sarah's. Just make that clear. Okay, so let's. And I'd like to give special points, also bonus points to the shirts. I think that's a great look there. The let it rip. So
yeah, we collaborated with AI on that one.
You're going to be forever stopped in the street. What's all that about? I reckon when you wear that out. But good, well done. And
do we get official numbers? We're getting official numbers?
Oh, I think so. Official numbers are there. Just yes, waiting for the drum roll. The drum roll, please. Back of house. So there we are. So it's still kicking along.
We'll let people
Right.
decide. There's a bottle.
Oh no!
There's a bottle of wine on this between the participants, so
It's kicking along.
it's very high stakes.
Where are we at?
Mean.
Have we capped?
That's right. Yep.
For a moment there, it was interesting.
And there's still
Look how
still
many people
time to put in your
swing.
decision. Let's let that little worm go either way. Just keep scanning there.
And there's still 4% who still don't know.
Look at the debaters, they're cheering on their horse. You know, it's like the finish at Flemington, isn't it? Come on, you good thing, you know. Oh, I think pretty confident. The let it rip, so they've done the hugs over there. They're pretty confident. I don't know how long does Slido take to come in? Is it sort of... Oh, hang on. Oh. This could be a photo finish. Oh, I think we have...
Righto.
Now, we're just about wrapped up for the day, but just an interesting little update here. So the debate was so convincing that there is nobody in the room who still doesn't know about AI either way. So here are the figures now. I have changed my mind. We should let it rip. There is now 11% change there. I've changed my mind. We should maintain control. There is 12% there. So it gets pretty interesting. So it means that I think we should still let it rip. 33%. I think we should maintain control. 44%. So how's that, eh? So credit again. Thanks to our debaters for putting the cases in both for and against. A great, really wonderful job.